Your daddy ever seen anybody get flattened by a train? Now what kind of question is that? It was Letty who said it. Come on, Ruth Ann, you jumped on me for asking a dumb question. What about Billy's? It ain't a dumb question, Billy said. My granddad used to work at a place at the depot, and he tells a story about how a fella got hit by a train in Kansas City, and dead as he was, he stayed on that engine car all the way to the Manifest Depot. Nobody wanted to peel him off, and since he had a round-trip ticket, they left him there all the way back to Kansas City. I heard a story like that, Letty said, only it was about a boy who rode a three-legged horse all the way to Springfield, and would you two hush up with your stories and let the poor girl tell her own, Ruth Ann scolded. All eyes were back on me. I don't suppose I have any story to tell, but my name's Abilene. That ain't a name, that's a place, said Billy. You from the one in Kansas or Texas? Neither. It doesn't matter where she's from, said a girl with fancy curls that looked like they were done in a beauty parlor. She raised her eyebrows and looked down her nose at me. The fact is, she's living in a saloon and a stone's throw away from that spooky Miss Sadie's divining parlor. My mother says that place is nothing but a den of iniquity. The only places I'd ever seen within a stone's throw from Shady's place were the cemetery and that broken-down shack of a house with perdition written on the gate. Truly, I didn't know what a divining parlor or a den of iniquity was, but you can bet I planned to find out. Shut up, Charlotte, and give the girl a chance to talk, Ruth Ann said again. Well, where are you from? Where's your home? That question always came up real quick. It was a universal, and I was ready for it. All over. My daddy says it's not down on any map. True places never are. Another voice, an older voice, spoke from the back of the room. I see your father's well versed in the works of Herman Melville. Suddenly chairs scooted back and the whole class stood. Good morning, Sister Redempta. Moby Dick, to be precise. Good morning, class. I see you've had ample time to meet your new classmate and welcome her with tales of dead bodies and dens of iniquity. She raised an eyebrow to the class. I gathered it was a woman since they called her sister, but since she was covered in black with only her face peeking out of what looked like a little white box, it was hard telling. Gideon says a rose is a rose, but when it comes down to it, there's some more rosy and some more thorny. I didn't yet know if she was rose or thorn, but one thing I knew for sure, she wasn't any universal. She was a towering figure, gliding solemnly to the front of the room. Her posture was straight and formal. The only movement about her was the swaying of a long strand of wooden beads wrapped around her waist, extending down to her knees. I caught the scent of lye soap as she walked past. Strong as it was, she must be a believer in cleanliness being next to godliness, and she wasn't taking any chances. It did occur to me to find it strange for a Baptist minister to send me to a Catholic school. Sometimes religious folks drew pretty deep lines in the sand. But having seen Shady's place, which was also part church, saloon, and workshop, I could tell his lines were a bit fuzzy. Sister Redempta placed a stack of papers on her desk. I'm sure you are eagerly awaiting your final report cards. There was a good amount of moaning and shuffling. Rest assured you have all received marks that are fair and representative of your work throughout the past year. She picked up the first paper in the stack. Billy Clanton. Billy walked to the front. Sister, he nodded, accepting the paper. As he shuffled back, those freckles got lost in the red rising in his cheeks. Charlotte Hamilton. Miss Beauty Parlor pranced to the front of the room. Thank you, sister. She smiled at everyone on her way back, but hearing the yelp she let out afterward, I thought she'd sat on attack. Her hand shot up. Sister Redempta, I'm afraid there's been a mistake. There is a B marked beside catechism. I'm aware of that, Charlotte. I graded your final exam, and among other things, I do not believe that wearing black to a funeral or giving last year's feather bonnet to your sister can be classified as corporal works of mercy. May Hughes, she continued, Ruth McIntyre, Noah Roseau, Soletta Taylor. It was almost worth having to go to school just to see everybody itching and squirming. After looking at her report card, Letty Taylor slouched in her seat and whispered to Ruth Ann, "Charlotte better air out that black dress for a funeral because my mama's going to kill me." I was sitting pretty as each name was called, knowing mine would not be among them. Abilene Tucker. I must have been smiling for a while because all of a sudden my mouth hurt from changing position so fast. "You are Abilene Tucker," Sister Redempta said it as if I'd been wondering about that for some time. "I understand that you have just arrived, and unfortunately that leaves me with no basis on which to give you a grade for this term." "Yes, ma'am," I said. Ain't it a shame, I thought. "Therefore you have a special assignment to complete during the summer." Assignment? Summer? A rose is a rose, but she was sprouting thorns, all right. "I am pleased that your ears are in such able condition. Let us put your mind to the test as well. It seems everyone is fond of a good story, dead bodies on trains notwithstanding. Therefore your assignment will be to write a story of your own. You may select the topic and it will be graded for your grammar, spelling, punctuation, and creativity. It will be due September 1st. She didn't wait for any ands, ifs, or buts from me. Good thing, too, as I couldn't think of a thing to say. But I didn't have any plans of still being in Manifest come September. "If you need help getting started," she peered out of her white box at the class, "I'm quite certain there are some students who would be happy to offer their assistance." There was a god-awful quiet as nobody could even look my way. Then Letty Taylor chanced to shoo a fly off, and quicker than an auctioneer, that woman pegged her. "Thank you, Salida. Perhaps your mother will allow you a stay of execution for a few months." Ruth Ann laughed behind her hand. "And Ruth Ann, a kind gesture on your part. As for the rest of you," she shot an evil eye at the class, "it would do you well to remember for next term that acts of charity and kindness are also taken into consideration in one's overall grade." Charlotte's hand shot up again. "I'd be happy to help the poor girl, sister." She gave me a pitiful look. "I'd even help her find some more suitable clothes, something a little less travel." "That won't be necessary, Charlotte. I'm sure Abilene will have quite enough help. Now let us stand for prayer." The class stood and Charlotte flipped her hair round. "No matter," she whispered over her shoulder. "I'm spending most of the summer with relatives in Charleston. You know, South Carolina." She was suddenly talking with a southern accent. "Pity, though. I would have thought the poor taste would have been a fine corporal work of mercy." Snooty girl, a universal. Fort Ticonderoga, May 28, 1936. Fortunately, the last day of school was brief, just long enough to hand out report cards and clean out desks. After lunch, when Shady said I could use the old treehouse out back for having friends over, he was off on 2 counts. First, I didn't have any friends. Second, that conglomeration of half-nailed boards could hardly be called a treehouse. Oh, it was in a tree, all right, 30 feet up with nothing to climb on except skinny branches and a rope ladder that looked to be holding on for dear life. But I'd spent the better part of an afternoon helping tidy up around Shady's place, and now I wanted to be alone, to look through the Lucky Bill cigar box that I'd found under the floorboards. That treehouse looked to be as alone as I could get. So I stuffed the box in my satchel and climbed, one creaky step at a time. The daylight coming through the floorboards was enough to make me wish I had a little fat on me so I wouldn't slide right through to the ground. Inside, I looked out a jacket hole that was pretending to be a window. I could see everything from up there. The Manifest Herald on one side of the hardware store, Coxey's Diner and Better Days Funeral Parlor on the other. Across the street were the bank, the post office, Dawkins' Drug and Dime Store, Cooper's Barber Shop, and the Curly Q Beautician Emporium, and those train tracks that Gideon was at the other end of. Then I saw Letty and Ruth Ann run into Dawkins' Drug and Dime. I stood on the outside looking in and on my way home from school. It had a soda fountain and jars of lemon drops, licorice whips, and candy buttons. I must have been steaming up the window because a stern-looking woman, probably Miss Dawkins herself, had shooed me off. I wondered what treats those girls were getting. Maybe Gideon'd take me there when he came to get me. Again, I felt a little off balance, like I'd felt at the newspaper office the day before. But who wouldn't feel a little wobbly in a rickety tree house so high above the ground? Enough goosenecking. I had a look around the tree house, figuring what I'd haul up with me next time. Food, for one thing. I'd skipped lunch, and the afternoon was heading from mid to late. There wasn't much left in the tree fort from previous dwellers, just an old hammer and a few rusted tin cans holding some even rustier nails, a couple of wood crates with the salt girl holding her umbrella painted on top, and a shabby plaque dangling sideways on one nail, Fort Ticonderoga, probably named after the famous fort from the Revolutionary War days. Anything else that might have been left behind had probably been weathered to bits and fallen through the cracks. No matter, I'd have this place whipped into shape lickety-split. First off, I'd pick out the straightest nail I could find and fix that sign up right. Fort Ticonderoga was open for business. Kneeling in front of one of the crates was like an altar. I opened the cigar box and let the contents tumble out. There was the map. Not a folded-up road map, but a homemade one on faded paper with worn edges. It was a hand-drawn picture of places around the town, labeled with names. Up top, in a youthful hand, were the words, "The Home Front." Then there were the keepsakes, little things kept for the sake of something or someone. A cork, a fishhook, a silver dollar, a fancy key, and a tiny wooden baby doll no bigger than a thimble, painted in bright colors and with a face and everything. To me they worked like treasures from a museum, things a person could study to learn about another time and the people who lived back then. Then there were the letters. I selected one and held the thin paper to my nose, wondering, hoping that I'd smell something of Gideon as a boy. Maybe smells like a dog or wood or pond water. I felt like I was floating in my daddy's world of summer and hide and seek and fishing when I opened the paper and read the greeting. "Dear Jinx," it said in an unfamiliar penmanship. My heart sank like a 5-gallon bucket of disappointment. The cigar box and letters didn't belong to Gideon, but I kept reading. Ned Gillen, Santa Fe Railroad, car next to caboose, January 15, 1918. Dear Jinx, if my penmanship is a bit jiggly, it's because I'm writing to you from the train. I know you're sore at me for leaving, but when you're older, you'll understand. Besides, I won't be gone for long. Check in on Pop for me. He might need a little help at the hardware store. In the meantime, somebody's got to keep watch on the home front. With the war going on, you can't be too careful about spies. You've heard some of the fellows talking about someone rattling around in the woods at all hours. Just last month, Stucky Sabas and Danny McIntyre said they were out one night fishing when they heard a rattling that sent their dogs into a tizzy. Stucky says his dog Bumper can sniff out spies just as well as raccoons, but sniffing around the woods, both dogs came back with nothing but a shank bone to show for their efforts. Well, that rattling spy, he's probably digging up all kinds of secret information to give to the Germans, like what's the best time to catch night crawlers or which boys are sneaking out at night to go skinny dipping. I wrote up a map so you'll know what's important when you're protecting. Plus, I left some mementos I know you've been eyeballing. Miss Liberty had silver dollar, fishing lure, and skeleton key. But don't get any ideas. When I get back by the end of the summer, they are to be returned to the rightful owner, me. So remember, be on the alert, keep your eyes and ears open. The Rattler is watching. Ned.